So good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vinda Kaur and head of Adol Shaw Goddard's Leeds office. I'd like to begin by thanking all of you for being here today, whether you're in the room or whether you've joined virtually. We've got colleagues and connections joining us from our Stronger Together network. And as part of our dedicated career series for our Stronger Together network, we're honoured to be hearing from Lubna Shuba, the President of the Law Society. Lubna is originally from Bradford, born and educated in Yorkshire, no less. And for those of us who are lawyers, she is our 178th president. She spent 14 years working in Yorkshire as a solicitor, and she is the first Asian, the first Muslim, and the 7th female to become the president of the Law Society. What an achievement. Now, when you're asked to give an introduction to an event like this, once you've gone through the bit about there not being fire alarms and the exits to the left and the right, which I didn't do, but there you are, you were given the opportunity to set the tone prior to the main event. So I found myself thinking about what the Stronger Together network actually represents. What are we? Who are we? And I then found myself thinking about what makes us as individuals. Who are we as individuals? Well, our backgrounds and our experiences, our schooling, our colleagues, our role models, and in many cases, for those of us amongst us today, our cultural background, I believe that has a profound effect on what we are and how we approach life. And that made me think about my own background and the impact some of the words that were said to me, in particular by my mother, over the course of my entire childhood. And if I ever wanted to do something, my mum would say, "Why not?" It was never a categorical yes or a no. It was always a, well, why not? And I think it was said in an attempt not to stifle my ambitions, even though, frankly, I think some of my suggestions were pretty ridiculous. And those words, I think they forced me to think about what I was saying and whether what I actually wanted to do was even feasible in the first place. And they made me assess the proposition, analyse and consider everything before I actually reached a conclusion. And those are skills that I have developed, and frankly I still use those skills today as a professional person. So to give you an example, Mum, I want to go to outer space. Well, why not? Well, maybe the scope to find a space centre to equip me with the skills to train is perhaps a bit limited in the Midlands. Maybe I won't cope with outer space, and maybe the venture into the unknown will be far too much for me. So maybe, on reflection, that's not really for me. Mum, I think I'd like to be a lawyer. Well, why not? I like words. I love the application of rules. I like analysis. My history teachers think I'm pretty good at this sort of stuff, and they think I'd do very well at it. But will I fit in? I don't know any lawyers, so I'm not sure. But the positives and the substance of my ambition far outweighs all the negatives. So you know what? I'm going to give it a go. Those words are words I've used time and time again in my head. Why not? So when we came up with the idea of forming a collaboration of lawyers and accountants in Leeds to create a specialist network focusing on ethnic diversity, well, the question was, why not? And the positives far outweighed any of the negatives. And on a very dull, very cold January morning, when the heads of those 9 firms came to discuss what we wanted to achieve, the fact that not one person counselled, despite busy diaries and hectic schedules, the fact that everyone attended spoke volumes about exactly how committed every single person was. One of our core aims is to raise the profile of racial diversity, inclusion and equality in the professional service sector. And our members have already established a cross-industry mentoring scheme, and we're investing heavily in our partnership with the Leeds City Academy, so we can aspire not only those in this room, but also future talent. So I read with interest Lubna had placed a statement on the Law Society website to say, I want to understand better the barriers that firms and businesses are facing when trying to recruit and promote diverse candidates, as well as identify the challenges facing those seeking to enter and progress through the sector. And that statement, well, frankly, encapsulates the core area which we as a network are seeking to address. And we'll be hearing more about Lubna's aspirations today. Amira Khan from Pinsent Masons and Octavia Malpura from KPMG will be facilitating questions for Lubna. And Amira and Octavia are part of our junior network, and they're part of the Stronger Together Junior Committee. And to end this session, Shabana Mania, a director at Walker Morris, she'll share some words at the end of the Q&A, which Octavia and Amira will be leading. We're welcoming questions, please, from the audience. And if you've dialed in virtually, you can share your questions for Lubna using the Teams Q&A box. So, before handing over to Lubna, I hope I have helped set the tone for the afternoon, and I would urge you to challenge yourselves in the future. And when you're faced with a proposition, ask yourselves, why not?
Sorry, give me a minute while I fiddle with the technology. Am I good to go? Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Absolutely delighted to be here. Oh gosh, that sounds very loud. I'm really, really delighted to be here back in Yorkshire. As you've just heard, I am from Bradford, so any excuse to come back to Yorkshire, I'm really pleased to take it. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey into law. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been doing as President of the Law Society of England and Wales. And then, as you heard, I'm happy to take some questions from all of you, so I hope you'll have some questions for me. And I know we've got a mixture of accountants and solicitors in the room, so I'll try to bear that in mind when I'm doing my talk and not just aim to speak to the solicitors in the room. So, yeah, if you don't understand something I've said, just call out and tell me. I'm happy to be corrected. So let me start with my journey into law. And actually, I should say thank you, first of all, to Stronger Together and for inviting me to come today. It's really, really nice that you reached out to me. And I'm delighted I've been able to come and speak to you all. So, as I said, I'm from Bradford. I am from a working class background. I went to state school in Bradford, and when I was growing up, I never planned to become a solicitor. It wasn't something that I thought somebody like me could do. I didn't think it was something for somebody from a working class background. I thought it was a very white establishment kind of profession, and you had to go to a red brick university, and I just didn't think it was something that I would be able to go into. And when I was a lot younger, we didn't have role models, legal role models. I didn't know any lawyers. I didn't watch any legal dramas on television. Those of you who are of a certain age in the audience, and there's not many from looking around, you might remember that we used to have 3 channels on television. We had BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV, and that was it. And they didn't show, it wasn't 24/7 TV. Actually, they didn't broadcast between lunchtime and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There were no programmes, and you had to wait till 4 o'clock for the children's programmes to start. So there were very limited exposure to lawyers and law firms and anything to do with law, and I didn't know anything about it. No such thing as mentors back then. Diversity wasn't even a word. Nobody talked about diversity. So what does that mean? No idea. So I thought, yeah, I'm not going to do law. That's not something that I can go into. My parents, and I'm sure very similar to many of you in the room here today, drilled into me from a very, very young age, education, education, education. Because they wanted more for me than they had been able to achieve themselves. My dad, he worked in the mills in Bradford, and my mum was a housewife. So, they didn't really know a great deal about further education, but they knew they wanted me to have a good education, and they wanted me to go to university. They knew that much. So I knew I was going to go to uni, and I had to think about what am I going to do when I get to uni. I had a couple of cousins in my family, and they were journalists. And they were very fortunate. They worked at the BBC as journalists, a lot older than me, and they used to tell me about the work that they did. They used to talk to me about the documentaries that they worked on. And, you know, we talk about role models. We talk about, you know, if you see somebody and you see them doing something, you think, yeah, I could do that. That's exactly what happened to me. I looked at my cousins and I listened to their stories and I thought, I could do that. I could be a journalist. I could do that. So I actually got myself a place to do English at university because I thought, I can be a journalist, I need to be good at English, I need to do English. So I got a place to do English. And when it came to my A-level grades, I did much better in my A-levels than my teachers had predicted. They obviously didn't have a lot of faith in me either. But I did really well in my A-levels. And it was at that point that a really good friend said to me, you could get onto a law degree with those grades. You should look at doing law. You could still be a journalist if you want to, but it will open up other options. So why don't you see if you can get yourself onto a law degree? And that put a seed in my head. And I thought, yeah, maybe I could do law. Didn't know anything about it, but I thought, yeah, that sounds good. Do law degree, because you know, law degrees still is very prestigious. Well, we know, Asian families, come on, medicine, law, accountancy, and that applies to everybody in the room. So I was like, yeah, law sounds... So I actually managed to get myself onto a law degree through clearing. That's how I got onto law. And I got a place at, back then, it was called the Polytechnic of Central London, so I went to Poly. And now it's Westminster University, but back then it was Poly. So that's where I went. I managed to get onto a law degree there, and that's where my journey into law started. And as soon as I started studying, loved it, absolutely loved it. I loved learning about cases, I loved learning about legislation, I loved learning about how does law apply to everyday life. You know, criminal law, I mean, I'm sure those of you that have done law in the room, that was really interesting, really exciting. English legal system. You kind of realised there was this whole set of rules and regulations that really underpinned everything that happened in society. And I thought, yeah, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a lawyer. I want to help people. I mean, it sounds really, you know, altruistic. I want to help people. So that's what I did. I thought, I'm going to do law. And those of you that are lawyers in the room, you will know that in order to become a solicitor, you needed to do your solicitor's exams. And way back then, it was called the Law Society's Solicitor's Finals exam. Now, and those of you will be familiar, it changed to the Legal Practice course, and now it's the Solicitor's Qualifying Examination, SQE as we fondly call it. And so I had to do the Law Society Solicitor's exams. And back then, there was only one place, there were two places. The College of Law was where you went to do your solicitor's exams. There was only one polytechnic that offered it, and that was Nottingham, or you went to the College of Law. And the College of Law, back then, there were 5 campuses that you could go and study to become a solicitor. There was one in York, there was one in Chester, there was one in Guildford, and there were 2 in London, in central London. One in Lancaster Gate, and one on Chancery Lane. Those of you who are not lawyers, the Law Society of England and Wales is based on Chancery Lane. The address is 113 Chancery Lane. So guess what? I went to Chancery Lane. I went to do my solicitor's finals exams on Chancery Lane. And that was just over 30 odd years ago. And I never dreamed in a million years, back then, 30 odd years ago, that I would be back on Chancery Lane 30 odd years later as president of the Law Society of England and Wales. So it just goes to show you do not know where your career is going to take you, where you're going to end up, and what opportunities are going to open up to you during the course of your career. So that was kind of a little bit about how I got into law. There were still challenges back then, similar to the challenges that I'm sure many of you in this room have faced, whether you're accountants or whether you're solicitors. I suspect this particular challenge is the same, and that is getting a job, getting a training contract. Back then, it was just as difficult to get a training contract as it is now, and I know it is now because students come and talk to me about it. So way back then, we had no internet, we had no social media, we had no email. If you were applying for a job, which I had to do to get, it was called articles. Training contract back then was called articles. If you were applying to get articles, you had to send a letter to everybody that you were going to apply to and post it. Can you believe it? Post stamps, letters, something you guys probably aren't familiar with. And what we had to do then, back then, was your CV, you had to go to a printer to get your CV printed off. And I remember going to the stationery shop and buying a wad of Conqueror paper. Conqueror paper is posh paper, and it's expensive posh paper. It's thick, expensive posh paper, and it cost a lot of money. But I went and I bought my Conqueror paper, and I took it to the printers, and I had to type out my CV and give it to the printers and say, can you put that on Conqueror paper for me, please? And it cost money. And I did that. And I sent off over 100 letters to try and get a training contract, more than 100. 100 CVs, and every single CV that went out had a cover letter written by hand, tailored to each firm, and that's what I did. And out of 100 letters, and it's more than 100 actually, more than 100 letters, I got about 15 rejections, and the rest of them didn't even bother replying. I think most of them probably looked at my CV, they saw my name, they saw I was from Bradford, they saw I went to a polytechnic, chucked it in the bin, I suspect. I got one interview, just one interview out of all of those. And that was with a firm in London called Fladgate Fielder. It's now called Fladgates, called Fladgate Fielder in the West End in London. And they called me for interview. And they offered me a training contract, articles. So one offer of job, and that was it. My foot was in the door. So, you know, I persevered, stuck with it, kept going, and I got that lucky break. And that was my avenue into law, and I qualified as a solicitor there, or I did my training there. Once I qualified as a solicitor, I then came back to Bradford, because my family was in Bradford, and I started working with a high street practice in Bradford. Back then, when I came into the profession, that was in the early 1990s, there were, and I didn't know this at the time, I found this out much, much later since I've got involved with the Law Society, but back then, there weren't many solicitors from a black, Asian or minority ethnic background. In fact, when I joined the profession, there were only 709 solicitors who were black, Asian or minority ethnic. 709, that's in the whole of England and Wales. And when I mention this, sometimes when, you know, I've spoken at various events about it, and at the end of the event, people will come up to me. I've had a couple of people come up to me and say, I was one of those 709. I was one of them. And it's like, we didn't think about it at the time. We got on with it. We got on with the job. We didn't think about it. There weren't many women in the profession back then. Not many women solicitors at all. And when I started my very, very first job in Bradford, they had a rule there about women. And the rule was, women can't wear trousers. Which is like, what, really? 30 odd years ago, women couldn't wear trousers at work, really? Yeah, not unusual. And if you went to court, women did wear trousers in court. Very recently, when I mentioned this, somebody came up to me and said, I remember being in court in the mid-1990s, and a woman stood up in court to address the judge, and she was wearing trousers. And the judge said to her, I can't hear from you. You're not appropriately dressed. And he wouldn't hear from her. That's how crazy it was in the 90s. But it's changed. I'm so pleased to say it's changed. And one of the very early achievements that I had was to persuade my firm, you've got to get rid of this trouser rule. It's discriminating against women. It's discriminating against me as a Muslim woman. Because I was a Muslim woman. I am a Muslim woman. I shouldn't say I was. It sounds like I'm still a Muslim woman. And I was working in Bradford, which is a predominantly Muslim community. I had Muslim clients. And, you know, you've got to dress a certain way. If you want to command respect from your clients and you want them to take you seriously, particularly in the 1990s when there were not many Asian female solicitors, you needed to fit the part and you needed to look the part. So I said to them, look, you've got to change this rule. And I'm delighted to say it took about 5 or 6 years, but they changed it. And it was, it's a real issue for me because, it sounds ridiculous now, but back then, trying to buy a skirt suit that wasn't a mini skirt, and when I say mini skirt, I'm talking about anything above the ankle. Because as a Muslim woman, it needed to go down to your ankle. It was not easy, I can tell you now, it was not easy. So when they changed the rule and I managed to go out and buy my first trouser suit, wow, that was a day. I was so happy, really delighted. So going back to the number of black, Asian, minority ethnic solicitors, I mentioned there were 709 when I joined the profession. I'm absolutely delighted to say that that has changed over the years. Now, in the solicitor profession, 18% are from a black, Asian or minority ethnic background. And that's higher than the general population. So law is a really attractive proposition for those that are from black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds. I'm really delighted to say that, it's really good. And when it comes to women, 52% of solicitors are now female. Sorry guys, male solicitors, we're taking over. It's brilliant. And one of the things that I get to do as part of my role as president is preside over admission ceremonies for newly qualified solicitors. And 60% of newly qualified solicitors are now female. So the numbers are changing, which is brilliant. It's really good to see that. But what we're not seeing is that they are not progressing, and this is black, Asian, minority ethnic solicitors and women, they're not progressing to the senior levels of the profession in the same proportions that they're coming into the profession. I'm now a sole practitioner, so I worked in Bradford with this high street firm for about 13, 14 years. And then I moved to Birmingham because I met my husband, and he was a Brummie. Well, he's from Wolverhampton actually, he's even worse. Bless him. So I moved to Birmingham. It was love that took me there. And I set up my own practice. And the reason I tell you that is because now, and I'm a sole practitioner, I have my own practice, Legal Swan Solicitor, sole practitioner in Birmingham. If you look at the number of sole practitioners who are from a black, Asian or minority ethnic background, 1/3 of them are black, Asian or minority ethnic. And we know that one of the reasons why is because they can't progress in more traditional law firms. They don't get promoted. They don't get to partnership level. So that's another option for them. I'll set up my own firm. So that's where we are. I became a mediator. That was a relatively new area of law, new area of work back then, and I've done mediation. And I'm really, really passionate about making sure that our profession is a welcoming profession, that whoever you are, whatever your background, whatever your socio-economic background, whatever your, whether you're black, Asian, minority ethnic, female, underprivileged, whatever, our profession is welcoming to you and it's open to you and you've got a place in it. If you've got the talent, the skills, the ambition, you absolutely should be able to join our profession and progress through the profession. Really important to me, and I'm using my leadership position to promote that as much as I can and to do what I can to achieve it. I'm talking to, and you mentioned this earlier on from what you picked up on the Law Society website, I am talking to senior partners in law firms to find out from them, well, why are you not promoting black, Asian, minority ethnic solicitors? Why are you not promoting more women? I'm talking to the judiciary, I'm talking to solicitor judges. Why are we not getting women, black, Asian, minority ethnic solicitors at the senior levels of the judiciary? We don't have enough solicitor judges. Why is that the case? So we're doing what we can to try and address that, and that's one of the things that I'm working on. So let me talk a little bit about what I'm doing as president of the Law Society. It's a 1-year role. I took office in October last year, so I'm already past halfway point. Time is absolutely flying by. So I've already been doing a lot of the work that I'm going to speak to you about now. So the first thing that I've been working on is championing the role that solicitors play in society and in upholding the rule of law. I don't know if all of you know what, the solicitors in the room hopefully will know what I mean when I say rule of law. If you don't, go back to your books. But when we talk about the rule of law, what we're saying is the law applies to everybody. no matter who you are, no matter what your background, it applies to everyone. That is the basic rule of law. And one of the issues that we've got at the moment is people don't understand that, and I think it's important that the wider public should understand that. The Law Society has been around nearly 200 years. It was established in 1825. And right from when it was established, we have supported solicitors to help members of the public protect their rights and to make sure that the rule of law is upheld. And the rule of law is one of the fundamental pillars of our democracy. If we don't have adherence to the rule of law by everybody, there will be chaos. There will be chaos. Everybody has to abide by the rule of law. So what we do at the Law Society, we hold those in power to account. We act in the best interest of our clients, we act independently, we act with integrity, and we do the best that we can. So what I want to do is I want to get the public to understand what do we mean when we talk about the rule of law, because they don't understand. Why would they? The only time that they start thinking about law and solicitors and the value that solicitors add to society is when they have to go and see a solicitor. And that's usually when they're in trouble, when they're in crisis, when they're distressed, divorce, needing to write a will, conveyancing, dispute. That's usually the kind of time. But actually, solicitors underpin everything. If you look around in society, contracts, solicitors are there making, drafting contracts. They're there advising companies, organisations, firms, businesses. They really underpin everything. So we want to get the public to understand that a lot better. And one of the other reasons why I want to do that is also because, we want the government to understand why it's really, really important that we have an effective justice system, and that everybody, no matter what their background, no matter what their means, everybody should be able to access a solicitor and get justice. And that's not happening at the moment, unfortunately. And that's a whole other talk that I could go on about for another half an hour, but I won't. So what have I been doing? So I do a lot of media interviews. I appear on television, I do radio interviews, I write articles in newspapers, magazines, talking about law, talking about people's rights, talking about the value that solicitors bring to society. And when I meet government ministers, which I do regularly, I challenge them. When they're bringing in proposals that we think undermine the rule of law, I challenge them and push back. So for example, the illegal migration bill, which is very high on the agenda for many people at the moment, and the way that asylum seekers are going to be treated, there's a lot of issues around rule of law with that. A lot of issues, and we push back on those. Very recently, we launched the Law Society's Legal Heroes campaign, and the purpose of that is to promote those solicitors up and down England and Wales who are the unsung heroes of our profession. So they're the ones who are grinding away, working really, really hard, making a real difference to people's lives on a day-to-day basis. And we want to tell their stories. We want people to see how they add value to society. So that's the first thing that I'm working on. And we're going to be announcing our Legal Heroes in September, so look out for that, those of you who are solicitors. The second thing that I'm working on is a focus on professional ethics. And I think that's something that will apply, I'm sure, to the accountants in the room as well as the solicitors, because I'm sure you all have ethics as part of your agenda and part of your training. The solicitor profession is one of the most highest regulated professions in the world. We know that we have to follow high ethical standards, high professional standards. I do a lot of work in professional regulation and disciplinary cases. I've been doing that for a number of years, and you mentioned that, some of the committees that I chair. So I know how important it is that we have high standards in our profession. But the world around us is changing, and it's changing very, very quickly. We have got new technologies. So for example, ChatGPT, very, very topical at the moment. Artificial intelligence, very, very topical at the moment, unregulated. But yet, solicitors are having to embrace these technologies. They're having to think about how are we going to use those in our practices and what are we going to do about them. We also know that there are now new ways of working. The traditional law firm model, 25% of them work in-house. So they're different ways of working. And because we've got all these new challenges coming up, it's throwing up new ethical questions that solicitors haven't had to deal with before, and they're having to think about now. We've got public opinion, which is changing all the time. We've got media rhetoric that solicitors are having to deal with. Public attitudes, within days, public will be saying one thing one day, another thing another day, and solicitors are like, well, what the hell do I do with all of this? And they're having to work out, how does that impact on my business? How does it impact on my clients? How does it impact on me as a solicitor? What should I do? So let me give you an example. Last year, we had the Russia-Ukraine war. And you may have picked up in the press that a number of solicitors were criticised for acting for Russian clients. Now, this was something that those solicitors, or any solicitor, had been able to do for years and years and years and years with no interest whatsoever from the wider public or the media. All of a sudden, because of the Russia-Ukraine war, we had the media saying, why are you acting for those Russian clients? Why are you acting for Russian oligarchs? And all of a sudden, solicitors and their firms were in the spotlight, they were in the headlights. And they were thinking about the reputational damage for their firms. And often some of these Russians that they were acting for, they were clients who did not agree with Putin's war. They were people who wanted to leave Russia, and they needed advice on, how do I get my business out of Russia? How do I get my assets? How do I move? What do I do? How do I deal with the situation? But yet solicitors were being criticised at this end by public opinion and the media for acting for them. And there was actually a minister who was very, very naughty because they used parliamentary privilege to specifically name a couple of law firms who had portfolios of Russian clients. So that was an area where you couldn't look at the rules and regulations and the principles that were in black and white from the Solicitors Regulation Authority to give you an answer, because there wasn't an answer. They had to figure out, how do I deal with the situation? And that's where the Law Society stepped in to advise them, to guide them and help them work their way through that minefield and deal with the potential reputational damage to their firms. Another area, climate change. A lot of firms are getting criticised for acting for particular clients because they're not climate friendly, because they're not doing anything to achieve net zero, or because their own firms are not doing anything to be more climate friendly and achieve net zero. And in fact, now junior solicitors and trainee solicitors who are coming into the profession will look at law firms before they apply to join them, and they will look at their credentials and see, what are you doing about climate change? What are you doing about diversity? And these are things that are not in black and white in the principles and regulations. So just 2 weeks ago, the Law Society launched the first ever climate change guidance for solicitors in the world. Nobody else has done it before. And other law societies and other bars internationally are looking to us and our guidance to see what they can learn from that and what they can distribute to their own members. So that's another area. So it's a really, really exciting project, ethics, because it covers a whole host of things. It will go on for about 3 years. I've launched the project and it'll be a long-term project. We've already held a number of roundtables. We've talked to large firms, we've talked to medium-sized firms, we've talked to small high street firms and sole practitioners, and we've talked to in-house solicitors. And what we've learned is that they all have different ethical dilemmas, different questions, different issues, and we are looking to provide support to each of those individually to help them work out, how do I deal with the issues that are facing me. Earlier this year, I gave a keynote speech in Parliament on ethics in the legal sector. And we had MPs there, we had peers from the House of Lords, we had members of the public, and they were really interested in the topic because the public get excited when it comes to ethics. And that was good to see, but it's a topic that a lot of people have got interest in. So I'm going to keep that conversation going during my presidency. The third thing that I'm working on is promoting the legal profession and the legal jurisdiction internationally. So the Law Society of England and Wales, very, very highly regarded across the world. Our legal jurisdiction, very, very highly regarded across the world. Other jurisdictions look to us to emulate what we're doing, to learn from us. And the other thing that I'm doing as president is, particularly post-Brexit, we're looking at where we can open up new legal markets for our members, where we can find new opportunities for our members to practice overseas. I am regularly talking to law societies and bars in other countries and looking at where we can create these opportunities. India has been a really big hot topic recently. You may have picked up, certainly maybe the solicitors in the room, if you read your Gazette, Law Society Gazette, you may have picked up India very, very recently agreed to open up its legal services market to foreign law firms and foreign lawyers. Now, they've refused to do that for a long, long, long time. And it's something the Law Society has been working on for a long, long, long time. I was very fortunate. I had a trip to India in February, March this year. And I spoke to the Bar Council of India. I spoke to the Law Minister for India. I spoke to a number of Indian law firms out there and Indian lawyers out there to get them to understand that English law firms and English lawyers coming and practicing in India was not going to be a threat to them. It was going to help them grow their businesses, their practices, their economy. And I hope that that did persuade them to change their mind, because the announcement to open up their legal market to foreign law firms and foreign lawyers was made 3 days after I came back to the UK. So I was like, yes, that's a win, I hope. And we're going to carry on working on that to make sure that it becomes a real reality. I'm also doing a lot to support our members in the country, so events like these. I've been in Yorkshire for 3 days. I was in Sheffield on Tuesday, Leeds yesterday, today, talking to members, talking to law firms, talking to aspiring students, talking to you guys. And it's really important to me to be engaging with our members, hearing from them, finding out what are their concerns, what are their issues, how can we help them. Because our job at the Law Society is to make their job easier, to make their life easier. I've been running President's Virtual Surgery, is what we call it. So what that means is, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on social media, I post on there when I've got a virtual surgery coming up. And the Law Society's on there, give us a follow. We're on TikTok as well, give us a follow if you're not already. And so I post my virtual surgery dates, and any solicitor can log on, book an appointment at a time to suit you, to talk to me online for 10-15 minutes about anything that you think the Law Society can help you with, any concern that you've got. And that's my way of being as accessible as I can be to as many members as I can up and down the country. It's really important to us to be able to do our job well, to know what your challenges are and what we can do to help you. So, I've nearly finished. I couldn't finish without talking about diversity in a bit more detail. I am so proud, I cannot tell you, to be the first Asian, the first Muslim, and only the 7th female president of the Law Society of England and Wales. You heard I'm the 178th president. I'm the 7th woman, you also heard that, and I told you earlier that the Law Society has been around 200 years. So I'm the 178th president. That means we have had 171 white male presidents. And it's changing. Yeah, it's changing, and I want to see that change. I want to see that change happen. And I'm delighted to be a part of it. I'm really, really fortunate to be in the position that I'm in, but I have worked really, really hard to get there. And it has needed determination, it has needed resilience and perseverance. You know, social mobility, diversity, inclusion, they're not just priorities, they're a given for me in my presidential year because I've lived it. I've lived it, I know what it's like. When I went to university, way back to do my law degree, I was very, very fortunate because at that time, you could get a grant from your local authority to pay for your tuition fees, to pay for your university fees, and to pay for some of your maintenance. If I hadn't got a local authority grant, there's no way I'd be where I am now. I would not have gone to university. My parents couldn't pay for me to go to university. I would have never taken out the kind of debt that, I have so much admiration for students now who have that, they take that leap of faith and they take out the kind of debt that they have to get a professional qualification. I think it's amazing. But for me, way back when they got rid of the grants, I remember being on the picket line campaigning and opposing them, protesting against getting rid of grants because I didn't want them to go. And, you know, I really feel passionate that anyone who's got talent, who's got ambition, who's got the skill, they absolutely should be able to join our profession. They absolutely should be able to progress through the profession. And we're doing what we can to bring that about. Diversity, it's a strength, it's an asset. It leads to better decision making and stronger businesses. And businesses are getting wise to this as well. And clients, they like to see themselves reflected in the people that they instruct. They like to see people who understand their culture, who understand their problems, who understand how they've ended up in the position that they've in. And that's really, really important. So I've already talked about we're making good progress. We've opened up, you know, we're getting people coming in. We need to see them progressing to the more senior levels of the profession and the judiciary. And I'm doing what I can to bring that about. Barriers are still there, but we're doing what we can to change it. So I think I've spoken for quite a long time. Thank you for listening to me, everybody. Really appreciate it. And thank you for coming today to listen. And I'm very happy to take questions.
I think I want to pick a question. I'll get started with the question, and just based on something that you actually mentioned around, you know, you're talking to different companies and organisations about, you know, why are people of ethnic minorities not being promoted or, you know, going further in their career. What are kind of some of the responses that you're getting, if you're allowed to share?
So we know already, because we've done a lot of research into this area, that there are a number of issues that are causing this. One of them is that those from Black, Asian, minority ethnic background, and women actually, don't get the same work opportunities quite often as their white counterparts. And I think part of this, you know, we've got to see the senior leaders in the profession pushing back on that. So when a client comes in and says, no, I don't want to instruct such and such, we need to see those senior leaders saying, actually, that's the best person for the job, and you are going to have to use them. Because that's when we're going to see change coming around. Another thing, you know, unconscious bias. We talk about unconscious bias quite a lot. I think there's a big element of that going on. People like to appoint people that look like them, people that they relate to, and we need to address that. So one of the things, I mean, I do, personally, I do unconscious bias training every single year, and I learn something every single year about myself. And I wouldn't think I've got any biases, because, you know, you think, God, I'm a woman, I'm Asian, but everybody has them. So one of the things that we really want to see is, you know, right across law firms, and particularly senior leaders, particularly those who are making decisions about recruitment, they need to do regular unconscious bias training and be really conscious of what they're doing when they're recruiting, when they're thinking about progression. You know, we want to see more blind recruitment happening in firms. I think it's happening a lot more now. But, you know, where you're advertising jobs or where you're recruiting for jobs, when you're looking at CVs, get rid of the name, get rid of the gender, get rid of the age, get rid of the address, get rid of the university that they went to, and judge it on merit. And we need to see more and more of that happening.
Fantastic, thank you.
Hi Lubna, it was great to meet you last year towards the beginning of the presidency and again today. I've received a couple of questions from our audience beforehand, so if I could start with those. One of them is, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
To my younger self? I think I'd probably say, don't worry about what other people think. Because I think that holds a lot of people back. Worrying about what other people think. I think you should just follow your own path and have confidence in your own abilities. Because there will always be people around you who don't want to see you succeed. There will always be people around you who will be jealous of what you're doing and how well you're doing. And they're the ones that will drag you down. And I would say, just ignore those voices and really focus on what you're doing, on what you want to achieve. And actually, you know, don't worry about failing. Don't worry about making mistakes, because that's how you learn. Making mistakes is part of learning. And one of the things that actually the Law Society is working on at the moment is really trying to get firms to change their culture, law firms, so that owning up to mistakes is much more acceptable, and people are not reluctant to do it, particularly junior lawyers who will often worry, God, if I've made a mistake, if I tell anyone I'm going to lose my job. We need to get rid of that. We need to make it a much more, okay, I've done something wrong, I need to tell somebody, and let's see what we can do to fix it. But yeah, I think probably that. Don't just ignore the other people.
That's great, and I guess that encourages more innovative thinking
when
you've not got that fear. So the second question we've received is whether you could share any thoughts on how wearing a headscarf or any visible religious symbol is viewed in the industry, and whether you think there are still misconceptions today about it.
That's a really, really good question. Really, really good question. When I came into the profession 30 odd years ago, there were actually very, very few professional women that wore hijab. It just didn't happen. There were very, very few women that wore it. Now, much more common, and I think that has made it more acceptable. It's brilliant. There's more visibility of it. There are women out there who do, I don't wear hijab, but there are women who do wear hijab. Sultana Tafada, I don't know if any of you have heard her name. She's the first hijab-wearing criminal barrister to become a KC. And she's amazing. I've met her, she's fantastic. She does terrorism type work, really, really cutting edge, interesting work. We've got a lady called Rafia Arshad. She is, again, it's another barrister. She is in Nottingham, I think. She is the first deputy district judge to wear a hijab in England and Wales. We know that there are now senior partners in firms who wear hijab. So the more we see it happen, the more role models are out there doing it, it is becoming more and more acceptable. There was a time where there was a perception that if you wore a hijab, you were timid, you were quiet, you were reserved, you were, that's gone now, I think. And it's really good to see that. It's really, really good to see that. People they take women in hijab seriously now, because wearing a hijab now, you're making a statement, and you're confidently making a statement, and that says a lot about you. That's a good thing. So I think it is changing, definitely.
Definitely. And then if it's all right, I've just got one question based on what you were saying earlier about your experience with retaining clients and the importance of that. So around, I guess, when you're more junior in your career, around networking, and as you then progress and become more senior about recruiting and retaining clients yourselves, what's your view on the kind of challenges that minorities might face, and your advice, but particularly when that status as a minority is crossed with intersectionality of kind of a low socioeconomic stance or religion, for example, where, for example, within lots of these kind of professional services, alcohol's a very common kind of culture. What would be your stance and your advice around that?
Alcohol is a really good one to mention, because I'm Muslim, don't drink, never drank. When I first came into the profession, I really struggled with networking, because all networking revolved around alcohol. Probably still does to some extent, but certainly 30 odd years ago, everything revolved around alcohol. I'd never been in a pub, I'd never been in a wine bar, I didn't know what you did ordering a drink I'd never done any of that. And I felt really, really uncomfortable in that environment. I didn't like it, I wasn't comfortable in it, but I had to do it because I didn't drink, but I had to go in those places because my firm was entertaining clients there. Hospitality took place. Hospitality was about getting your clients drunk back then. That's what it was. You'd be the one sober person in the room while everybody else is legless, thinking, God, I've got to sit through this. But it was part and parcel of what you had to do. And I think there was an element, when I came into the profession, there was an element of not wanting to stand out and not wanting to be different, wanting to blend in. And this is going back to only 709 solicitors from a black, Asian, minority ethnic background, not many women. You didn't want to be somebody that stood out, you didn't want to be the troublemaker, you didn't want to be the person that, didn't get involved. And it was tough, it was really, really tough. And one of the things that I would say, and I do say to people now, this is coming back to kind of the client question, work out what your USP is and don't shy away from it. Because that is, my USP way back then was that I was an Asian Muslim female solicitor in Bradford. There were clients out there that wanted to come to me because I was an Asian woman solicitor, and they could talk to me, and they could relate to. I could speak their language. If they had elderly parents that didn't speak English, I could talk to them in their language, and that meant a lot. And it's about finding what your USP is and use that to build your networks and build your clients, because clients like to work with people they like. They don't really care if you're good at the job. I mean, obviously you've got to be good at the job, but they don't know. Most of them don't actually know whether you're really, really good or you're just okay. But they know if they like you, and they know if they trust you, and they know if you produce results for them. And that's what you need to focus on. And part of that is networking. I hated networking. I absolutely hated it. But you know what? What I didn't realise back then, as an Asian Muslim woman, I did networking all the time because I went to weddings. I got dragged to weddings. I had to go to parties. I did it all the time, but I never thought of it as networking. You never think, but you know what? That's networking. You're meeting new people. You're talking to new people. And I say, really build networking is so important. And I mean, obviously, when you're at a wedding, you are networking. But not just, when we think about networking, we think, breakfast meeting, business meeting. You're not just networking in breakfast meetings and business meetings. You are networking whenever you meet somebody new, whoever you're meeting. Students come to me, young solicitors come to, new trainee solicitors come to me, and they say to me, I went to a networking event, and there were no lawyers there, so I just left. And I'm like, well, that was a stupid thing to do. Because actually, it doesn't matter whether there's any lawyers there or not. You don't know who the people in that room know. You don't know who their networks are. And if you get to know people and they like you and they get on with you and they remember you, they will talk about you to other people. And that's how you grow networks. And you need to think about, when you're doing networking, think about, before you get there, think about, what am I going to talk about? And don't just talk about about law or accountancy, because actually that's quite boring. People don't really want to know what a brilliant solicitor or accountant you are. What they want to know is, what do you do in your spare time? What are your interests? What excites you? What gives you passion? Where have you travelled from? That's a really good question. Where have you travelled from? Because that opens a whole range of, once you know where they're from, do you know? I don't know. You can pick up a conversation with that. Holidays. That's networking. And that's how you build your clients. And if your clients like you, they will stay with you. That was a really long answer, sorry.
That was really helpful, thank you. I'll pass back to Octavia now. You can
Before I open up to the floor, I just have one more question for you around kind of navigating yourself in spaces where you kind of feel like you're the only one that looks like yourself. So I work in professional services in the tax team, and I find myself in most cases being the only black female especially. How have you kind of navigated yourself in those spaces where you found yourself, you are the only ethnic minority in that room?
I think you have to not get hung up on it. You just have to focus on the job that you're doing and do a good job, because actually that's what it boils down to. It doesn't matter if you're black, Asian, minority ethnic, woman, can you do a good job? And if you're doing a good job, you're going to prove yourself that way. And very, very important, I've been so lucky in my life because I've had so many allies. Majority of them actually have been white male allies, and I've been so lucky. And this comes from working hard and proving that you're doing a good job. When people see that, they will become your voice in spaces where you don't have a voice. They will be the ones who will say to you, you should have a go at that, you'll be really good at that. And they will see potential in you well before you think you can do something yourself. So focus on your allies and focus on just doing the best that you can. Don't get hung up on, oh my God, I'm the only Asian Muslim woman in the room. So what? Actually, because you're the only Asian woman in the room, you need to do a really good job, and you need to make sure you're doing a good job.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the floor.
Don't ask me any hard questions.
I'm sure some of you have any questions. So if you've got any questions for Lubna, please feel free to raise your hand and the mic will come to you.
they're stunned into silence.
Last one, because it kind of links into your point about allyship. So you talked already about the importance, thank you, of the sort of the talent, the skills and ambition are the most important things, which I think is absolutely right. And I always say, I wouldn't want to recruit 10 people like me, because I wouldn't want to work with 10 people like me. And so you want that diversity. But what your point I thought was really good about allyship, and what sort of key things do you think make the biggest difference in terms of making positive impacts in terms of allyship?
Do you mean for allies?
For allies, so keeping them the guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, fantastic what you've just said. You wouldn't want to recruit 10 people that look like you. That's a really good starting point. Because actually, there's a lot of people out there who would recruit 10 people that look just like them, because they think, oh, well, I'm going to get on with them, we're going to have something in common. I think being conscious of that actually we want to give opportunities to others. I think businesses are getting much more savvy now. They're realising that diversity is a good business decision, which is brilliant. But, you know, mentoring, really, really important, that through mentoring, allies can help other people who haven't had the same experiences. So let me give you an example. When I first qualified as a solicitor, I didn't have networks. My parents couldn't introduce me to other professionals. So I had to find my own way. And the first time I went to a dinner where there were 3 knives and forks on the table, and 3 spoons on the table, and a plate on each side, I'm like, what the hell? What do I do with this then? Honestly, that is a real issue, because if you're from a working class background, and you've never been to a, you know, it's not even a posh dinner nowadays. It's a, you know, can be really overwhelming and really intimidating. Now, as an ally, you share your experiences with each other and you learn from each other, and it's giving people the confidence to be in those spaces where they otherwise would feel very, very uncomfortable, and not feel that they can fit in, or not feel that they can deal with those situations. So that's part and parcel of it. And being a voice. And so if you're in a room, you need to call out when other people make comments. You need to call out when you see recruitment happening which is not diverse. That's where we rely on allies, because allies are our voice in spaces where we don't have voices. And that's really, really important. I could do a whole lecture on that. Do a whole load to talk on allyship, but I won't. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions in the room? Yeah,
Hi.
My name's Karen, and we have a lot of similarities, not the colour of our skin, but I did articles, I had a grant from Rotherham Borough Council, and I came from a working class background, and so actually I'd forgotten about the grant until you mentioned it. I thought, I must remember that when
it's important.
Yes, that was literally a grant and not a loan. So I guess I wanted to share your experience. I wonder if it's similar to mine, that there has been a massive change in the diversity through, in my case, I work for one of the firms that are on the screen behind you, but you now work in your own practice, but will act for a variety of different kinds of clients. And I've seen a massive change over the, let's call it 30 years, it's probably a little bit more than that, that I have been present in terms of all pillars of diversity, and but I still feel that we need to continue to be conscious of that, and to be pushing it, to be encouraging it, to both in terms of gender and race and religion and disability and social mobility. Do you feel that this journey that we're on is still going quickly enough, or do you feel that we need to concentrate on certain parts of it in a more vigorous way? I'm wondering with the the audiences that you're finding yourself in front of in these first sort of 8 months of your presidency, have you learned things that are happening that are quite shocking, or are you encouraged?
I'm encouraged, I have to say, but I want to get to a stage where we're not talking about it anymore. That's where I want to be. I have to talk about it, and I'm absolutely going to use my platform to talk about it, because it's really important, and I will call it out, and I do call it out, and I do challenge people when they make comments or whatever. But I want to be, until we get to a time when we're not talking about it anymore, there's so much more to do. And we're a long way off that yet.
Yeah, and I think one of the, you also mentioned this, but I think it's important we don't lose sight of it, is there's great representation now going into the profession and professions, and I would imagine accountancy statistics are very similar. But it's the progression through one's career that is, frankly, still quite shocking. And so for the audience in here, a lot of you are at the younger end and earlier in your careers. I would massively encourage you all to stick with it and to forge your own pathways and to talk and to collaborate and not to disappear and go into other places, but to sort of be confident and following in Lubna's footsteps. I think it's
Well, I hope by being here today and just talking to people, it will encourage them to stick with it. I mean, that's part and parcel of me going out and giving visibility to the role.
Yeah, no, thank you for doing
Sorry, just linked to, I suppose, the speed and the movement of change, I suppose. Just be interested to hear your views on, I suppose, positive discrimination, and whether that would assist, or whether you think that's something within law firms, accountancy, whatever profession, because I appreciate it's controversial across the business world, but interested to hear what you think about that.
I mean, I think there are all sorts of conversations going on at the minute around targets, around quotas and that kind of thing. Targets are helpful because how do you measure? If you haven't got them, how are you going to measure movement, progress? But equally, it's got to be the right candidates for the business. You can't just appoint somebody because. But if you've got two people who are on an equal level when it comes to their skills, their experience, then yeah. If you're looking at what your targets, what within your organisation, what is the diversity within your organisation, then absolutely look at giving opportunities to the candidate that might not otherwise have them, who's from a black, Asian, minority ethnic background. But it has to be on merit. I don't advocate appointing people just because of. It has to be on merit, because otherwise what's the point? We're not, we want to be there because we deserve to be there, and because we've worked hard to get there, and we can do the job and we can do the role. Question in front.
I think I'll be right.
I don't know if they can hear you over there. That's fine. Hi.
To what extent is it responsibility lie with us? I think people call it, or is it lie with the business and decision makers?
I think now younger people coming into the profession generally take it very seriously and push back more. So, for example, I mentioned earlier, very, very briefly, that now, certainly within the legal profession, trainee solicitors, students that are looking for training contracts, they look at a firm's diversity policies, they look at the makeup of the firm, they look at who are the partners, what does the staff team look like. If they get called for interview, they will ask questions about it. What do you do to promote diversity? What events have you got going on in the firm? How are you inclusive? What are you doing about it? So I'm actually encouraged by those that are coming into certainly the legal profession, because I think they're much more wise to it than we were. We were just grateful for a job, man. It's like, thank you for giving, you didn't think about it. But now, firms will, now younger students, trainees, they will say, no thanks, I don't want to work for that firm. They don't meet my values. They're not going to be a cultural fit for me. I don't want to be there. And that's how firms are realising that they need to change, because that's how change will come about. It's about changing culture. And I think everybody's got a responsibility to do that. Everybody.
Hi, I'm Wendy. It's
Hello.
lovely to meet you. My question is going back to when you were younger.
100 years ago. Yeah.
I know you said you were lucky to have a lot of white male allies, so I'm sure there would have been times that you was the only brown female, possibly only brown person in the room when they were not there. I just wonder, how did you have your voice, or would you wait till you were
It took time to find it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, often you'd be like, they'd think you're going to make the coffee. You know, your clients want, client would come in and they, if it was somebody you hadn't met before, they'd assume they were the receptionist. Or if I was in court, they'd think you were the court usher or something. And I mean, it takes time and it takes confidence, but you have to have a voice. Because if you don't, how are people going to take you seriously? Responsibility is on us as well to make sure that people understand that, yeah, I'm a solicitor, yeah, I know what I'm doing, and yeah, I've got something to say about this. So yeah, it wasn't easy, but your confidence grows.
Hi, Lubna. So the question I have is around social mobility, because I know you talked a little bit about you being from Bradford. So I'm also from a working class background, and I found that comes with a whole host of different challenges. Now, in the workplace, I work at Intermix, and there's so much going around in terms of diversity when you're in the firm, but I think I was just really lucky to get here and just to get my foot in the door. So as much as all this work is really great, what can we do to help people get in from those backgrounds? Because I look back at people I'm in school and not many made it here. Yeah.
I'm sure you weren't lucky. I'm sure you earned that position and you worked hard to get there, because they wouldn't have given it to you otherwise. But once you get into a firm, I think you have a responsibility. I mean, I don't know what they're doing at your firm in terms of any diversity initiatives they've got there, diversity networks they've got there. I think it's important to, if they haven't got them, you need to get involved in them or persuade the partners to set them up. And you need to look at arranging events, raising awareness, get speakers in. It's about getting, because what we've got to remember is there are those people who they haven't been exposed to people from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds. They're not used to working, well, I hope everybody's flipping used to working with women solicitors by now, but, sometimes they just haven't had that exposure themselves. And we've got a responsibility as well and it's going back to mentoring, it's about reverse mentoring. It's not just about senior leaders sharing their experiences, skills, knowledge with juniors. It works the other way around as well. And I've spoken to many, many senior partners in law firms who have got so much value out of things like reverse mentoring or attending an event where, I don't know, you talk about Ramadan, you talk about Eid, you talk about Diwali, it's just talking about things that they would not have had exposure to and they don't understand. And it's raising that awareness, and that's how you have a more inclusive organisation. And we've all got a responsibility to do that, and especially if you're junior, go and harass your partners, man, do it. Tell them to do something about it. They'll listen to you.
Ethan.
Oh, you've got to go. Okay, see you later. Valeria's from the law side team. She's our engagement manager for Yorkshire, but she's got to shoot off to catch a train.
Sorry about this. Lovely to meet you all. Have fun.
Bye, Valeria.
Thank you.
I love now. My name is Louis.
I'm
a seat trainee, so it's been really inspiring to hear from you, but also kind of a self-reflective opportunity. Kind of think about, as an ethnic minority person working in law, my own achievements really as well to this point. My question is kind of linking to what you said about the Law Society's role in helping the general public understand what solicitors do. In business services, we're at the cross-section of so many issues, and when it comes to diversity, we're often actually more reactive than advisory.
Yeah.
That's just how it is in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, how in business services, and in particular commercial law, how can we be less reactive and more advisory when trying to help the general public rather than business to business understand what we do?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that people don't know, they don't recognise when they need to get legal advice, and they often end up not getting advice when they should have done, and then ended up in a situation where it's gone too far and they've hit crisis stage. So I think one of the things one of the things that I do is write articles where we talk about people's rights, where we talk about, why do you need to have a will? Why we talk about divorce, talk about, I don't know, giving more visibility, because actually somebody reading, or even on social media, there's no social media when I was coming into the profession, but I think social media is a fantastic place to really raise awareness of issues, and a lot of people will read that, and sometimes somebody will read it and recognise, well actually I think that might apply to me, maybe I should do something about it. So I think it's about raising awareness of the general public about what their legal rights are, about when they need to be thinking about going to take legal advice, and getting there early. That's the thing. They don't go early because they don't realise. So it's raising more awareness of that, I think.
Thank you very much, Lubna, for all of your insights, and thanks everyone for all your questions. I'd just like to pass over to Shabana now for some closing words. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Shabana Miller. I'm the director at Walker Morris. On behalf of everyone at Stronger Together, I just want to say a huge thank you to Lubna for sharing her insightful, open and honest journey for her career so far. I say so far because I have a feeling there's a long way to go for you yet, Lubna, and we're excited to see where that goes.
My husband wants me to retire.
Go listen to him. You've got so much more
it's like we need to have a life of leisure now.
Thank you also to Amira and Octavia for leading the Q&A so skillfully. And thank you to all of you. Obviously, we won't be here today if it wasn't for all of you, so thank you to all of you for joining us, and including those people who've joined us by teams. I think there is so much that Lubna has said today which has resonated with me on so many levels, and I feel like we could sit and share stories for hours on end, Lubna. And I'm sure for each one of you, you will take away some personal nuggets of wisdom to apply in your own lives and your own career journeys. But I think one of the things that really resonated with me was when Lubna talked about being on Chancery Lane and sitting her exams on Chancery Lane, but never daring to dream that she would one day be sat as president of the Law Society on Chancery Lane. And I think that got me thinking about how sometimes we all self-limit. We impose limits on ourselves, which then do end up being self-fulfilling prophecies and do limit what we can achieve. So that could be anything in terms of, I'm not going to apply for a job at that law firm because surely they're not going to take somebody who looks like me. Or I'm not going to apply for that promotion because there are so many other people who look different who are more likely to get it than I am. Or even, I'm not going to go to that networking event because I don't know how to network, I don't know how to have a conversation with people, especially people who are drinking and I don't drink. There are so many different ways in which we self-limit, but I think if we think the sky's the limit, then we may just get there, or not necessarily to the skies, as Harinda realised as a young child she was never going to make it into the sky. But we can all be Lubnas in our own way, and we can all forge our own path, and just not let our ambitions be tempered by what we think how we think other people might react to us. And like I say, I'm sure all of you have taken away your own kind of key points from Lubna's talk, and I hope you've all found it as insightful and interesting as I did. Just a few more thanks before we finish. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I want to thank, first of all, everyone who's been working to support the Stronger Together network. Obviously, the aim of the network is to try to put into practice a lot of what Lubna has spoken about, so to improve racial diversity and inclusion across law firms, across accountancy firms in Leeds. And we couldn't do that without your support. So thank you to everybody who supported us in our first 14 months as an organisation. Whether that's you being involved in the mentoring, whether that's being involved in the junior committee, or just helping us make the progress that we've seen so far. Thank you also to our JCO members, so all of you who help out on the junior committee at Stronger Together. We really wouldn't be able to do what we do without your insights, because ultimately it's your careers which are the future, and yours are the careers that we're hoping to help flourish by doing what we do. And thank you finally to Parinda and Anshaw Goddard for providing the venue for today's event, their hospitality, and to Caroline, Rob and Abbas for helping Sanita to help pull all of this together and the logistics for today, because although it looks very simple when we're all sat here today, believe you me, a lot of planning has gone into making sure that this has happened. So thank you again to you. And I think it's now a networking session. I know Lubna has to leave. I think
I'm okay for a little bit, but yeah.
so if you've got any final questions, nab Lubna before I do, and you might manage a few minutes for that. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy networking with each other.